is Miranda Rumi. I'm the chief organizer for the 2019 Bali IIT. And we're doing this webinar so that you get a chance to know the trainers and also a little bit more IIT and having a chance to ask questions and close and personal. And we've done the 3 so far, and now with Dorset. Dorset is, well, the initiator of the Bali IIT. Without Dorset, I don't think there would be a Bali IIT. And Dorset's been coming to Bali for many, many years and have great love for Bali and also great love for NVC and kind of like combining that, and has been teaching NVC in some form and manners for the past 12 years. And since 2017, we've had, 2017, we had the first IIT, and then again on 2018, and this is going to be the 3rd one. And very happy to have that. And so, Dorset, I'm going to pass it on to you and let you introduce yourself a little bit and about how you get to know NVC and where you're from, and just a brief intro about NVC and IIT and you.
Okay, thank you, Miranda. So how did I come across NVC? Well, I was working as a counsellor in England, specialised in codependency and recovery from codependency and intimate relationships. And I used to do 7-day residential trainings at Findhorn every year on the dynamics of intimacy. And a lot of that was about codependency, recovery from codependency, setting boundaries, and healing past wounds. And this was of great interest to me specifically because it's what I needed to do myself for my own self-healing and my own journey. And I've always been a great believer in teaching what you need to learn. So during the 90s, I changed my career because I was a musician up to that point, and I changed my career into doing these lectures on codependency, which was a great interest to me, and I found that it was a great interest to my friends and community in England, where I lived in Totnes in Devon. And I started doing these lectures. They were very popular. At the same time, I did some workshops and big lectures at festivals, and eventually I decided that I needed to have more grounding in therapy, and so I took a RSA counselling course for 2 years to become a counsellor, and I also did 2 years more to become a practitioner in neuro-linguistic programming, which is called NLP, and hypnotherapy. And I found that as time went on, I got more and more couples coming to me in distress, and they wanted help. And they specifically wanted to know how to resolve conflicts. So I decided to make a special study in resolving conflicts, how to do that. And that led me eventually to discover NVC. I was recommended to go and see Marshall Rosenberg, who was the founder of NVC and the creator of NVC. And he came to England in 1999. And I did a foundation course with Bridget Belgrave and Gina Laurie. And then I did a mediation training with Marshall in London. And I found it fascinating. I thought it was a little bit difficult for me. It's over my head. I thought it might be tricky to do. So I thought, well, I'm going to have to learn more about this. I'll put it on the shelf. I'll come back to it in a few years. And that's what I did. I put it on the shelf. And in 2002, I'd mentioned it to somebody when I was doing a workshop in Ireland, and they asked me to go and to come and mediate in their town because there was a big problem going on between the local African refugees and the local Irish volunteers who were looking after those, whose job was to take care of those refugees. They were falling out, and big problems were ensuing. So I didn't think I was qualified to do this job, and I turned the lady down twice, but she came to me 3 times, and she was really desperate the 3rd time, and so I gave in. And so I did this mediation between the 2 leaders, the leader of the Irish volunteers and the leader of the African refugees. And to my amazement and their amazement, after 2 days, only 2 hours each day, these 2 leaders stood up and shook hands across the table and agreed to work with each other. And I was amazed. They were amazed. In fact, they turned to me and said, "How did you do that?" And I said, "Well, it's this process called nonviolent communication that I learned. And it's rather good, isn't it?" And they said, "Yes, it's amazing." And said, "Would you teach it to us? Will you teach it to us?" And so I said, "Ooh, well, I've never done that before, but yes, I guess I could do that." And so that was how my nonviolent communication career began in 2002. I gave my first workshop and my first mediation. And the workshop was to 25 Africans and 25 Irish volunteers. And it was a great success. They loved it. They learned a lot. And at the end, there was a gentleman turned up who I hadn't seen before, and he was an Irishman. He came along and came up to me after everybody had gone and said, "That was a fantastic job. Thank you so much. Can I buy you a drink?" And I was like, "Yeah, sure. Who are you?" And he said, "Oh, I'm sorry, I forgot to introduce myself. I'm from the government. I'm from the Refugee Council, part of the Irish government. And would you be willing to, accept my thanks on behalf of the government?" And I said, "Well, yes, I'm very delighted." So he took me across the road. We had a couple of Guinnesses. And after we'd had those 2 Guinnesses, he said, "Oh, here's my card. And by the way, just send me the bill." And that amazed me because I had been doing it as a volunteer for free up to that point. But when I went home to the lady who had invited me to do the mediation, who I was staying with at the time, and told her that what had happened, I said, "Well, how much should I charge them?" And she said, "Charge them like a wounded bull. They're the government." So I did. And I received £1,000 from my first mediation. And that set me off on the journey that I'm still on right now, which is teaching MDC and mediating and teaching mediation. And I'm applying right now to become a mediator for the United Nations. And that's where I ended up doing this. Shortly after that mediation, I was in Bali. It was 2002, and you may remember that's when the bomb went off, and I was there when the bomb went off. And so I was invited to, I went to volunteer at Sanglah Hospital, and they asked me if I'd like to manage the Crisis Centre that they were setting up to deal with all the people who came to look for their loved ones who were either dead or wounded following the bomb. So I said, yes, feeling that I was vastly ill-equipped to do the job. I had no training in this at all, but you know, the empathy, the basic tools that I learned from doing a 9-day international intensive training with Marshall in Switzerland just previous to the bomb gave me the tools that I needed and the confidence that I needed to do that job. And you know, I was dealing with a lot of ambassadors, consuls, generals, quite, how can I say, important people, people who thought they were important, that's for sure. And they were all wanting to know what was happening with their people. And I did the best I could to organize things and make it easy for people to find their loved ones or lost ones. And I set up a system, organized something out of chaos there. And it was quite a journey for me. And I guess that was about the beginning of my journey teaching in Bali and in Indonesia. Following that, I in 2004, I became a certified trainer, and then I started teaching. I taught right across Indonesia, from Sumatra all the way to Papua. I've taught post-tsunami Aceh, you know, which is where the big tsunami hit. And actually we were teaching women who, mostly divorced women, who still wear the burqa up there. It's Sharia law, and it's pretty, what do you call it, orthodox Muslim people. And divorced ladies who have children really don't have much going for them. And so we were recommending that they got together as a co-operative and work together to make themselves more powerful, and using NVC to present their needs to the community to be accepted as equals. And down in Papua, I was working with people who were dealing with soldiers pointing guns at them. And again, that was a really interesting job, because I was able to, for 4 days, do role plays with these guys, you know, where they would empathize with a person who was pointing a gun at them. And that actually worked. And it was one of the most joyful moments for me, was after doing that for 4 days. One of the men that I taught had gone on a journey across Papua, and he had been stopped at a roadblock and been invited to get out of his car. And, you know, he thought, oh my God, any moment now they're going to take me in the jungle and shoot me, which is what they have been doing quite frequently. And so he used what I taught him, and he began to empathize with the soldier. And first of all, he just opened up a conversation talking about the weather, something innocuous, something that didn't matter too much. And then the next minute, he was going deeper, and he was saying, I wonder, it must be pretty lonely being out here on this roadblock. I guess you're a long way from home. Are you from Java? And the soldier said, yes, I am. And he said, so I guess it's a long time since you've seen your family. And the soldier started opening up, and they started having a conversation between two human beings. And that's what I've been teaching them, is to reach out to the human being, not to ignore the gun, to ignore the uniform, but see the humanity in the person that they're dealing with. And so once you've got that going, it's much more difficult for somebody to shoot you. And so anyway, he sent me an SMS the day after the training saying, got stopped at another roadblock, used that NV stuff. It was brilliant. Thanks, you saved my life. And I thought, oh, that's why I do this job. So yeah, that's why I do this job.
Yeah. Wow. I mean, I've known you for quite some time, and you know, like you've told me different story. I mean, many stories, but I haven't heard this one. And it's always so fascinating, and so many ways that, you know, like you've used NVC, and
Yes.
and I would say successfully in unusual circumstances. Yeah. So,
Yeah. Well, that was certainly, you know, a really gratifying experience, because I really love making a difference, and that's why I do this work, is because making a difference is my purpose in life. It's what gives my life meaning, and why I get up in the morning. That's why I've applied to the United Nations, because I feel like that's a place I could really make a difference in a big way if I could be a war mediator and mediate between countries at war. I think that's probably the greatest difference that I personally could make on this planet with my skill set at the moment. It's a job that I've always felt a calling to do. You know, I really want to make peace. I want to create peace. I'd like to see more peace in the war, because I had a very unpeaceful childhood. You know, I guess I'd like to share that my father was an alcoholic, and you know, I was an abused child, and it was that living in an unsafe environment, in a place of danger, that led me to be passionate about peace, about wanting peace in the world, about wanting peace in my world specifically. But I feel really strongly about peace, perhaps a little bit over the top. I fight for peace. I fight for peace for women and children who are, subject to violence, sexual abuse, any of these things that, animal abuse. It's abhorrent to me. It really makes me sick. And there's nothing more important to me in my life than to fight and do something about it. And I found that NVC, nonviolent communication, has been the tool that's enabled me to make the biggest difference. Even if it's just one conversation at a time, I'm able to make a little bit of change in the world. And I really believe that if enough of us do it, if there's enough, we'll reach that critical mass, like the 100 monkey syndrome, where you have enough people who are making this difference that it actually catches on and becomes normal. And then everybody will be doing it. And then we will have a more peaceful world, because people will be talking and reaching resolution through talking and communicating rather than picking up guns and shooting.
Yeah, wow. I mean, I'm feeling very inspired right now, and it's again, like I've said, I've known you before, but this moment, something touched me really deeply when you said that you're so passionate about peace, coming from an unsafe household and childhood, and fighting for peace. I guess I was never looking at it like that, at the very personal level, fighting for peace, just just between two people or between like an immediate
Yes.
surrounding. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I didn't have a peaceful childhood. I'd like to make life more peaceful for others. I'd like them not to have to go through what I went through. And it takes a long time to heal when you have been around somebody who is dangerous. It's a huge journey. People say, well, obviously you just need to forgive them. Actually, that's not very easy. Easier said than done. It's taken me years and years and years to come to terms with my stepfather, who was my father since I was a year and a half old.
And he's the one who is abusive. Yeah.
Sorry?
He's the one who is abusive, the stepfather.
Yes, yeah. Yeah. I do understand why. He was a traumatized man. He was in the Second World War. He lost all his friends. He turned to alcohol because it was his coping mechanism. There's ample reason for why he was the way he was. And I was an innocent child in the middle of it all. And,
the damage was still done. The damage was still done to you. And it sounds like, NVC had really helped you greatly to heal that. And
absolutely,
really
yes, I'd done a lot of work.
About that.
I did a lot of work before I came across NVC, and nothing really made the big difference that NVC did. I was finally able to make peace with him and make peace with my mother as well. We had a lot of differences too. One of them, I suppose, my mother. The main problem I had with my mother was that she criticised me, never ending seemed, and it made visiting her so painful because it seemed that nothing I did was ever good enough. So that was the message that I received, was that I'm just not good enough. My wife wasn't good enough. My life wasn't good enough. My work, my clothes, my appearance, everything about me. I kept making wrong choices, and if only I did things differently, then I would be more happy, and so on, so forth. And when I learned NVC, this is an interesting story. I enjoyed telling this because I've found that many people had this experience, that NVC is something that they sometimes find doesn't work with our nearest and dearest. And that's what I found with my mother. You know, I learned NVC and I learned empathy skills, and I thought, oh, great, now I can really sort things out with my mum. I went home and saw my mum, and, you know, she started in at me, you know, as usual, saying, are you still with that woman, my partner? And, you know, we were going out to lunch, and she said, you're not coming out dressed like that, are you? Which was a typical line that she used to toss at me. And I looked at her and I said, Mum, do you really, I guess you really want me to be happy, is that right? And these criticisms you're making of me is because you feel that if I did these things differently, like you suggest, then I would be a happier person. Is that correct? And she said, of course I want you to be happy. And then she looked at me and said, wait a minute, are you doing some sort of mind game with me? Are you practicing some kind of psychological manipulation? Is this something you learned in a workshop? I know what you're doing. I can see right through you. I know you better than you know yourself. Yes.
Oh, good.
And
Yeah.
don't you try these things on me, young man, because I won't have it. And I went, gulp. God, this that doesn't work. You know, it's honestly, I was hoping so much it would work, and it didn't. You know, so I followed everything and said, yeah, well, Mum, I didn't want to argue with you, and I was trying something that I'd learned, and sorry you feel that it was manipulative. I won't do it anymore. And, you know, I just sort of swallowed everything, and we went out and had our usual kind of awkward lunch and left in an awkward way, and I didn't feel good, and nor did she. And then when I got home, I rang up somebody, an NVC colleague, and I said, this NVC stuff didn't work with my mum. You know, I'm so disappointed. And this person gave me some empathy, and then we got to talking about strategies, about how I could have done things differently with my mum. And this friend said, did you think about trying silent empathy? And I said, silent empathy? Oh my God, you mean not saying anything, just sort of feeling it and doing it internally? And they said, yeah, exactly. You guess their feelings, you guess their needs, but you don't say anything. You just, and you don't take it on. So what do you mean you don't take it on? They said, well, it's like Tai Chi, you know, when you water fall off you like it does off a duck's back. You know that old saying, what you resist persists? Well, that's what you've been doing. You've been resisting your mum, haven't you? Every time she criticized you, you took it on full frontal, and you felt terrible. And you felt angry. And I said, yeah, that's so true. I feel shame about being not good enough. And I do get angry because I seem to go straight there instead of feeling the shame. It seems to be a habit I have. And they said, well, why don't you try this silent empathy and see what happens? So the next time I went and see my mum, that's exactly what I did. I sort of silently empathized, and I just, you know, Mum was giving her usual criticism stories, and I was going, and I wasn't taking it on, but I didn't argue or fight back. I just went, and you know what? After about 20 minutes, she stopped. She stopped criticizing, and she just said, well, it's a lovely day. Shall we go for a walk? And I was like, yes, let's go for a walk. You know, that would be great. And we went for a walk, and we had a meal. And, you know, we had a lovely afternoon. And at the end of the afternoon, she said to me, you know, Dorset, that was the best day we've had together in years. I said, it's so nice. It's been so nice having you here. And what a delight it's been. I don't know why it couldn't have been like this for the last 20 years. But really, you know, I really hope that we can continue to meet like this because it's so much more pleasant. And I said, Mum, I couldn't agree with you more. It really was wonderful for me too. And, you know, that's exactly how we continued from then on. And it just shows that because I didn't resist and, you know, fight back or even try the verbal with her, and it didn't work because probably there was still some part of me that was smarting and hurting from the criticism, and she picked up on that. You know, somehow, well, we got connection and we got love back, love returned to our relationship instead of fear. And how wonderful was that? You know, just great.
Yeah. Yeah. And sounds so simple.
Yeah, well, it is actually. And this is the amazing thing that when you find the answer, I think the, you know, the searching for what works, well, and did in my case for sure. But when you finally get there, it is simple, and it's wonderful. It's wonderful to find a way to help love return when it's been absent for a long time, to help connection return when you've been disconnected and separate for a long time. And that's been the great gift of NVC to me in my relationships as well. I when I was younger, I couldn't have a long relationship. I seem to have this 3-year mark. You know, I get to 3 years and then it was all over. And, you know, it just got too painful to stay together. So we went our separate ways. And I didn't have the tools to come back together. It's not that I don't, you know, with my partner, since I came across NVC, we still had arguments. We still had our differences. We still had disconnection. But I had the tools to reconnect quicker. And, you know, that's the big difference that NVC made to my life, that I was able to reconnect after disconnecting. Whereas in the past, I couldn't do that.
Yeah. Well, I would imagine. Yeah, sorry.
I was with Gina for 17 years, you know, so, you know, until she died. This was my last partner, which was
quite an achievement, eh?
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm listening to what you're saying, you know, like it does sound very easy, but imagine if two people are like in a heated moment. I think it's sometimes very difficult to just be silent. And I would imagine that you need the education and the other practice to at least have that some of that consciousness, so that in that moment of heatedness, then you would find a gap to remember.
I mean, that pause, yes, taking the pause. Well, I mean, ideally, yes, I would ideally like not to have any arguments or fights, you know, to be able to take that pause and do something differently. And I have done many times. Many times I have been able to do that. And I must admit, there are still, well, have been still times up until Gina died that I didn't do that. That there were times when I semi-did it. You know, I can say I half did it. I did the sort of, I took the pause, but I still went away hurting. And you know, that resentment or, pain, it's pain. Basically, I've learned that what really, one of my core issues is receiving criticism and feeling ashamed, feeling immense shame when that happens. Yeah. And that shame is so painful. Yeah. And so this is why shame really interests me, because it's one of my big bugbears. It's the thing that really bothers me the most. And I've realized that in the past, in order to avoid it, I went straight to anger or even rage, because I wanted to avoid that feeling of wishing I didn't exist, wishing that the world would just open up and gobble me up. You know, I experienced that a lot as a child, when I was criticized, and that hasn't gone away. You know, even today, when I receive criticism, it takes immense work for me to take that pause, take a breath, don't react, don't come straight back with some attack or defense, you know, but to actually take space and time out, which is the best thing I can possibly do, to actually take myself away and process what's going on with myself, which means give myself empathy, self-empathy, connect with my own feelings, my own needs, you know, which might very well be that on top I'm feeling angry, I'm feeling rage. How dare they? Who do they think they are? Blah, blah, blah. You know, I'm telling a story. I'm telling myself this story. And that's exactly what I do. I take myself away and I start telling myself that. I'm telling myself that they think they're God. They think they know who's right and who's wrong. They think that they're better than me. They think they can tell me what to do. They think this, they think that. And, you know, these are my jackals. And I let my jackals go for a run. And sometimes there's a lot of them and there's a lot of running involved. It can take half an hour for me to let all these jackals go. And then I finally am exhausted. I've exhausted myself because I've let all these jackals out. And I'm going, Jesus, oh, I am so, you know, and I'm having a scream and a yell. Sometimes I swear. I go for a walk on the beach. Or I go for a drive in the car. I found these are good places to let out my anger in a safe and appropriate way because I don't want to dump it on somebody. And then when sometimes in an altered state, and I have to remind myself, what am I here? What am I doing here? What am I here for? And then I go, oh yeah, I'm going to do that self-empathy thing that I learned from NVC, nonviolent communication. And what's that? Okay, well, it goes like this. What actually happened? What was the observation? What actually happened? Oh yeah, they called me selfish. And how do I feel? Well, I feel angry. And then I have another jackal. Oh, I'm telling myself blah, blah, blah. And I'm telling myself this. And I'm telling myself they've got no right to say those things. And, you know, who do they think they are? And so on. And I might go around and around and around until I finally come back to, okay, how am I feeling? I don't feel angry anymore. I feel tired. And I feel sad. And oh God, I feel ashamed. And I feel ashamed because there's a part of me that desperately wants to be perfect, that wants to be, that thinks that I should be perfect. I shouldn't make any mistakes. I shouldn't have done what I did or said what I said or whatever it was that they criticized. And you know what? I agree with them in a way. And that's what's causing the shame. I'm agreeing that I'm not perfect, that I have screwed up, that I have made a mistake, and I hate myself for it. So that's awful. I'm telling myself that I shouldn't have done it. I'm doing more jackling of myself. I've stopped jackling them now. I'm jackling me. This is my shame story. And so I have more jackling to do until that is worked through. And then I come back to a place of exhaustion and maybe sadness. But then I might realize that I'm also feeling more peaceful. And that's interesting. And then I come to a place of, oh, that's good. Now, what comes next? Oh yeah, I remember that my okay is not the only thing going on here. There's another person involved, and their needs matter as well. And I can't be totally happy and peaceful if they're still distraught and upset and in pain. And when I start empathizing with the other person, and I start thinking, I wonder what was going on with them. I'm curious. What were they feeling? What were they needing? Then I start doing the other half of the equation, if you like, the other side of the coin. And I start thinking, what's going on for them when they started criticizing me? I guess they weren't very happy. And if they weren't very happy, that means they had some unmet need. And I wonder what that was. What was it they wanted when they called me selfish? What was it they were really wanting at that time? I guess they were wanting to be heard or seen or respected or understood. Huh, fancy that. Now that changes my perspective. Now I've got a new perspective of them and myself. And then I'm able to go, okay, what am I going to do now? I think now I'm ready to go back and have a conversation with them. I'm in a much better space now. I'm not in that fight or flight mode, that attack or defend part of my brain, the amygdala. I'm not there anymore. I'm able to go to that part of me which wants to relate, that relational part of my brain that is able to listen and express myself, really listen to them and really hear them and try and find out what it is they really want and what I could do to actually help them get it. And that is basically what mediation's all about. So all this stuff is really connected for me.
Yeah. Wow. Like we start the story, and then suddenly you get into the teaching, and I think it's wonderful that in I think it was about 20 minutes, we can all learn the steps, and you laid it out so clearly.
Oh, great.
There's just this
Yes.
part, starting from observing there's an event until you get to that place of peace.
Yes.
You just did.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, I hope the attendees, Pia, Ivana, and Lucy, you're all getting something out of this, I guess, mini workshop. But I find it very, very succinct. And then yeah, it's like if you just listen to the replay again and just maybe just note that down and apply it, I feel it's already very, very applicable. Yes.
It's really helped me a lot. It's been very
Yeah.
helpful.
Yeah.
Are you getting some messages from people?
Yeah, can you see
Do
that?
you get messages while we talk? Or
Yeah, can you click on the chat? There's a chat or the chat.
oh yes.
Part. Yeah.
Yes, I can do that. Oh yes. People are
Responding.
communicating. Hi Lucy.
Yeah.
Lucy Young. Hi Lucy and hi Ivana.
Yeah, so Lucy coming from Australia. Well, yeah, Ivana's coming from Jakarta, an expat from Jakarta, and Pia already. So
yes,
yeah,
I do.
Yeah. Well, we don't have much time left, and I would like to give the opportunity for the attendees to ask questions. Do you have any question you'd like to ask Dorset before we wrap it up? Okay. So you're already
before Jakarta.
Okay.
Yeah. If you have any questions, I guess I'm remembering what we said on our title. That was about that we were talking about shame. We were talking about healing, self-healing, which we had talked about, and we were talking about setting boundaries. And I guess I could add a little bit about setting boundaries, which I haven't really mentioned. And for me, setting boundaries has been absolutely essential in my recovery from codependency. And it's actually for me about compassion. It's become a way of using the protective power of force, using force to protect rather than to punish, which is a principle of nonviolent communication. Setting boundaries is saying what I am willing to do, what I'm not willing to do, and what is okay with me and what is not okay. It's being honest and upfront. Whereas in the past, I might have been afraid to say those things. because I was afraid what other people might think. I didn't want to upset them and this sort of thing. I realized that actually being clear about my needs and what I do and don't want is a gift. It's actually, it helps relationships, it helps connections, it helps others to be able to relate to me and me to them. And it has been such a gift for me to learn how to set boundaries myself, and now I teach others to do that, and I will be doing that at the IIT.
Super. Yeah. Well, so what are you going to be teaching at the IIT, Dorset?
Well, I will be doing a session on setting boundaries. I would like to do a session on shame. I may or may not be doing something on mediation, because that depends on the other trainers. I know that Mukti and Carl
are going to.
They're also planning to do mediation sessions, so I may not duplicate that. I might let them just go ahead and do that. We don't all have to do the same thing. In fact, it's better if we don't. So for me, yeah, the healing, different applications of healing is what I'll be concentrating on. I'm going to concentrate on healing the past, healing the wounds that we have from childhood, finding our core wounding. What is that core, those core messages that we give to ourselves, like, as I told you about my own, which was that I wasn't good enough, you know, that might cause you to become a perfectionist, you know, in my case.
To not be criticized.
It made me really difficult to live with and work with. I remember I was a musician in my past life, in my former years, and I was really hard to work with because I was never satisfied with anything we did. You know, we'd play a gig, and at the end, everybody would be celebrating, and they'd be saying, "Wasn't that a great gig?" And I'd be saying, "No, you got this bit wrong, and you got that bit wrong, and I just remember the third bar of the fourth song, you lost the timing," and so on. You know, I remembered all the bad things, you know, and that made me hard to be with and hard to work with, and that is the problem of being a perfectionist. So I know that there must be others out there who want to work on that.
There's a lot of choice. I mean, I think it's all very current and very common issues, you know, like setting boundaries for a lot of people is a very hard thing to do, and causing a lot of pain in them just from not being able. So I think that's something that's going to be, there's going to be a lot, and I think it's very exciting, and we may even do the money thing.
Oh yes, you want to talk about that, the special gift?
Yes,
please do.
CNVC. We'll do it together. Yeah. So you're coming to the training, and so just start thinking about what you want to learn, because there would be a chance for people to write in, like their questions or their suggestions, right, Dorset? You know, everybody puts their what is it, like requests for the offerings or something like that, and so choices are very, very respected and honored, I guess, in the IIT.
Definitely, and encouraged. Yes,
and encouraged, exactly.
We're looking forward to hearing what.
That's. I think I've really enjoyed this conversation, Dorset, and I think all of you hopefully also too. And maybe later, before we start the IIT, we'll do another intimate, personal kind of like talk like this, because even in IIT sometimes we don't have this kind of like really personal where you can just really ask any question, you know, like you would be meeting in classes or maybe in lunch or dinners. But I find this is a very, very personal and very intimate, and really enjoy that.
I've loved it too, and relished to do this again, because it's not something that I get to do very often. You know, even in teaching, telling stories, well, I do sometimes, but you know, like, you know, time is so precious in trainings, and I want people to get the maximum from experience. So I usually create the majority of the time is for experiences. So they actually are doing things together, they being the participants. And I am the facilitator who sets those role plays up or mediations and that sort of thing. That's what I love to do. But I also love to tell these stories because I know that I've learned a lot from stories, and I have a lot of stories. I'm an old guy, and so
every time I see you, there's a new story.
Love to see you too, Miranda, and thank you so much for being there and setting this thing up, because it's such a great idea, and I'm really grateful.
Yeah, but this is kind of like our pilot project series. So in about a month's time, we'll organize it much better than this, and hopefully, many more people will learn about it, hear about it, and come and join. So thank you, Lucy, Pia, and Ivana, if you're still there. It's been great having you, and Lucy, you've been coming to basically every single session. I'm really touched by your enthusiasm, and looking forward to finally meeting you in 2 months, less than 2 months.
Me too.
Yeah, in 2 months. Yeah. All right. Yeah, and I'll see you soon, Dorset. Thank you. Bye.